Bonsoir à tous. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on personal branding, crafting, and sharing your story. My name is Nora Boudrein. I'm a board member at the McGill Alumni Association, a master's student in international management at Sciences Po Paris, and the vice chair of this event, the Toolbox series. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this evening's webinar, hosted jointly by the McGill Young Alumni and the McGill Women's Alumni Association. The Toolbox series is an annual event that focuses on practical skills to support McGill alumni and current students. This event series was founded over 30 years ago by our dear friend and colleague, Sylvia Piggott, who sadly passed away this year. Sylvia was an outstanding leader in the McGill community and in Montreal, serving as a valued board member at the MWAA. For decades, she worked to ensure McGill alumni and students were equipped with the right tools to adapt to the changing world of work and life. She was also the founder and president of the Black Academic Scholarship Fund, one of the many community initiatives she was involved with. We hope this event will continue to honor her legacy by providing guidance and tools to help McGill alumni thrive in their careers. This year's topic, focused on personal branding, will provide you with the best ways to market yourself professionally and construct a narrative around your personality and strengths. Now more than ever in this digital age, actively working to refine and create a distinctive personal brand has become an essential tool for professional and personal success. But how do you define who you are? How do you build your own strong personal brand into what you want it to be? And how do you position yourself to be noticed and recognized for this brand? Well, we'll try to answer these questions, and we have an exciting lineup this year with two incredible speakers, Sally and Derek, joining us from San Francisco and Vancouver. Our two speakers will share the floor for about 20 minutes, and the rest of the hour will be spent answering your questions directly. We'd love to hear from you, so please use the question feature to send in your questions during the discussion. It's now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Derek Burrows, who will start by discussing how marketing concepts can be leveraged in creating a personal brand. In 2014, Derek graduated from McGill with a bachelor's in engineering. He is now a senior product marketing manager at Unity Technologies with experience in sales, support, and product marketing. His role involves bringing Unity's technology, which is well established in the gaming space, to the industrial world and establishing Unity's brand in construction, automotive, and other key industries. Through his time managing new graduates, Derek has seen what can help candidates succeed and thrive in tech companies. He will offer advice on how to maintain your sense of self while climbing the corporate ladder. In the next part of this discussion, our second speaker, Sally Clapper, will focus on the mindset to adopt when creating and refining your personal brand. Sally Clapper is the founder of Career Compass. Her sole focus is to help job seekers at all levels to align themselves with the right company and position for them. She's also the creator of the Job Accelerator program, specifically designed to help students and new graduates land internships and full-time jobs. Prior to this, Sally has spent over 15 years working in marketing roles, with the last 5 years as a VP marketing for a startup tech company. Today, a large part of her work involves helping people to position, brand, and market themselves to be more attractive to employers with strategies that are working in 2021. I will now start up the discussion with Derek. You can take the floor.
All righty. Thank you so much, Nora. Go ahead and pull up my screen here. Give me one moment. Excellent. Hopefully that is coming through. You should see a slide with a nondescript building. Thank you, Canva, for this lovely template. That means I don't have to use the company branded ones. But hello, everyone. It's so good to be here. Pleasure to be speaking with McGill again. Shame that I couldn't be there in person, but wishing you all the best from Vancouver. Today we are talking about personal branding, and I recognize that, you know, I might not know the most about that. That's what Sally's here for. But I have learned a thing or two about how branding can influence marketing. And there are, I think, are a lot of lessons that we can take from the marketing world and apply those to your careers and yourselves as you're looking for your roles. So I'm going to briefly introduce today a few key concepts. Number one, what is a brand? Number two, how do you position a brand? And number three, how can we take those lessons and apply those to positioning yourself, your personal brand? And I'll go ahead and introduce myself with a quick, set of anecdotes on how branding has impacted my life. I got my first job out of college with a company called National Instruments. They are a wonderful company. I spent my first, 5 years of my career there. But when I interviewed with them, I didn't actually know who they were. This is the National Instruments logo. You might find it familiar. But what you're probably thinking of is the calculator company. That's Texas Instruments. And I didn't know the difference when I first went up to their booth at a McGill career fair. I recognized the logo, or so I thought, went up to have a conversation, and it's another electronics company based out of Texas with a very similar logo. This was my first lesson in how branding plays a role in our minds and kind of shapes what we do. I went up to that booth because that calculator I'd been using since elementary school had a little Texas Instruments logo on it that was instantly familiar to me and felt like it was worth having a conversation about. National Instruments, I'd used some of their software and their hardware as part of my engineering labs, but they didn't have the same brand awareness in my mind, and therefore I, got the wrong impression. So all that to say, it worked out fine. National Instruments still hired me, even though when they asked me about why I wanted to work there, I told them all about a Texas Instruments product. It was fine. I spent 5 years trying on a lot of different hats and trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to do. When I started as an applications engineer, I was in an engineering leadership program, which made it easy to try a few different roles. I was a support engineer, I was a support engineering manager, I was a sales engineer, and eventually I got into product marketing. And that was my second big lesson when it came to branding. In 2020, we finally brought forth the culmination of all that we'd learned as we'd worked with customers and moved away from that world of getting confused with Texas Instruments all the darn time. We rebranded. We changed our name from National Instruments to NI. Doesn't stand for anything, it's just NI now. And that was after a lot of listening to our customers. They were calling us NI anyways. It's faster to say, far less syllables. And our logo used to be really difficult to pick out from a lineup. In our space of tested measurements, they were all almost identical. So we chose a new eye-catching green. We chose a more modern font to show off the fact that we are more software defined, a little bit more modern than most of our competitors. And we were very, very careful about positioning ourselves in a new way so that our market would perceive us in the way that we wanted to be perceived, because we needed to shift our perception in that industry. So that was around the time that I left NI and went over to Unity Technologies. And I have been working with Unity since the beginning of this year. I joined them in January. And this is a perfectly timed talk that we're doing, because just this past week, Unity had a little bit of a rebrand itself. This YouTube video is called Say Hello to the Unity Brand. And what you will see is some beautiful graphics that are playing very loudly in my ear. And this is effectively our new logo concept. It went from the logo you see on the left to the logo that you see on the right. Not a huge shift, you might say. It's a little more modern, a little more scalable, allows us to create some clever icons. But I think there's a misconception when it comes to brand. There are a lot of people who think about a brand and assume it's the logo. And the main thing that I'd like you to take away from this is that your brand is not your logo or your slogan. The logo is certainly a part of it, similar to how you dress gives some instant signals about how you are perceived to the world around you. But the main thing about a brand is your brand is how you are perceived in an audience. And that became really, really clear to me with Unity. For those of you who might not know, Unity is a gaming company. They power most of the mobile games out in the market right now. They power, as a game engine, more games than I think any other company today. And you've definitely played them. You've probably played Pokemon Go on your phone. You've probably installed a few mobile games and just kind of played around with those. Those were likely powered by Unity. And of course, we power a lot of console games and other more high fidelity games as well. In the gaming space, Unity is so well known that it's a household name. Everyone knows it. We are a market leader. We're dominant in that space. We have a massive customer base. If we want to tell a really engaging story, we have customers lined up around the block to tell that story. If we want to show up at a conference, people are going to come to our booth just because they know who we are in this space. But just because you're really well known in one industry doesn't necessarily translate to the rest of the world. Unity in industrial is a really, really cool new play for us. Unity makes a game engine, which effectively is like the physics engine, the real-time renderer for all these different 3D experiences. And there's a lot of different applications for that in the industrial space. Everything from the screens in high-end automobiles, those can be powered by Unity, all the way to, simulating autonomous driving situations. If you want to put your car through the paces of, what happens when a deer walks out in front of it, or what happens when you turn the wrong way on a busy street, you can do that with a game engine and make some really big industrial strides. But we are new to this market. People don't know the name Unity because it's not known as an automotive company or a construction company. It's a gaming company. We are no longer the dominant giant in the room. We have to market ourselves and educate our customers like a disruptive competitor. There's a whole ecosystem of products for these consumers, and we have to show them that we are worth a darn. And then when it comes to telling customer stories, we are so excited to work with big customers and we want to tell their stories, but we have to do a lot more legwork to amplify those stories, to get those customers in, because we don't have people lining up around the block to get in front of new customers with Unity. Here, we are still making a name for ourselves, so there's a little bit more of that legwork. All of this is to say that your brand is not something which is the same thing to every person or the same thing to every audience. Your brand is defined by the audience you're presenting it to. Now, let me bring that back to personal branding for a moment. There are a lot of different audiences that you as a person interact with, and you interact with them super, super differently. I am interacting differently with you guys now because I'm presenting than I would normally. I'd probably be using my hands less. You are most likely a different person at home with family, at work with your bosses and your coworkers, with your friends, and in a college group project. You probably have assumed different roles in each of these different organizations based on the people around you and what they perceive you as. And I don't know if any of you guys have gone back home potentially from college and kind of met up with your old friends and felt yourself kind of slip into a comfortable, different person than you are now because you reinvented yourself a little bit in college and now you're back home. That is personal branding. That is your kind of understanding of who you are to these people shifting over time. So that's what a brand is. That's how it impacts marketing. And there are a lot of ties to how this impacts you as well. So let me give you guys a really, really quick intro to how you would position a brand in the marketing world. And then we can bring that over to how you would position yourself in a space. So when you're trying to position your brand, it's really important to understand how your audience perceives you right now, and to know how you solve challenges, what you can offer to that audience. Then once you understand yourself a little bit better, you can position yourself. You can show off what makes you the best. A few of the really important questions that we ask when we're trying to understand how our brand is doing are things like, what problems does our company solve for you? And then you get a little bit deeper. What is the one thing that we do that you can't get anywhere else? Understand why they need you in that way. What are 5 words you use to describe us? Get a sense for, a pulse for how they feel about you in a space. And then if you're curious about a particular competitor, you'd ask some questions around them as well. What makes us good? What makes us better? Once you understand yourself a little bit more, you craft that into a positioning statement. You are talking to a specific audience. Once again, you're not the same person to all people. You are trying to understand how you fit into a particular world. And then you kind of tailor yourself to the challenges of that audience and where your strengths overlap with those challenges. So that's the very basics on positioning and branding. This is a classic positioning statement for your brands. For your target audience who have a need, your brand provides a big benefit that differentiates you, and we can prove it because of XYZ features or whatever else. Now, let's take that over to positioning yourself and some of the things that I've learned over the course of my, not that long career around embracing your strengths and accepting your weaknesses. This is a D&D character sheet on the left, and I will explain why that is, because I'd like us to consider min-maxing as a thought exercise. I'm assuming that most of the people on this call probably don't play as many video games and D&D as I do, working at Unity of all places. But min-maxing is a concept around, you are going to purposefully underinvest into certain stats so that you can invest heavily into others. Let's say you're a barbarian, you want a lot of strength, you don't necessarily need that much intelligence. So you'd assign your points appropriately. This is something you can kind of do in your professional life as well. And one of the things that I have learned is that being well balanced is overrated. I spent a long time early in my career trying to shore up my weaknesses. I knew that I sucked at being detail oriented. I was so bad at it. I couldn't keep track of my schedules. I had all these different planners, all these different new techniques I was going to use to stay on top of my workload. And there was a lot of churn that created for me. And eventually I found that if I could really focus on opportunities that allowed me to show off my best sides, my creative, my driven sides, that would allow me to downplay the areas that I'm not very good at. So I stopped trying to become a really well-rounded person, started trying to really focus in on my strengths. This graph that I've got here, this is from a test that I did. It's insights discovery. It's not so different from a Myers-Briggs or something like that. But you can see I have these different attributes. And the yellow one, that creativity, enthusiasm, that was all the way up, like 95%. And then my detail-oriented, my conscientiousness, my general attention to detail, that was down to like 3% or something like that. I have come to embrace that, and I have found roles that allow me to do so. I wanted things that would allow me to come up with big ideas, but that didn't necessarily require a lot of, boring follow-through. I wanted things that would allow me to speak in front of audiences without necessarily having to maintain contact with all these different customers. That's how I ended up in a career in product marketing, because even with my engineering degree, I realized development work wasn't for me. Too much detail, too much consistency. I wanted things that were varied. I wanted things that felt a little bit different and exciting each and every day. And that's because I understood myself and I knew where I wanted to invest my skill points. So think about what your skills are, think about min-maxing those, what it means to kind of let some of these things fall off the table so that you can capitalize on your strengths. I also wanted to bring back in some of those brand questions that we ask at companies, because you can ask the same questions about yourself. Ask your peers, ask people after a group project, or if you're feeling really bold, ask your boss. What value do I offer you as a part of this team, as a part of this company? What is the one thing you can count on me for that you couldn't ask someone else for? What are 5 words you would use to describe me personally? What person would you say that I'm most like, and how am I different to them? This last one I think is really, really useful, because I believe that finding a good mentor is really, really important. It took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to do when I was trying on all these different hats. And what helped me was finding someone who was just like me in a leadership position that was living their best life and seems to be thriving. And that's how I found someone in product marketing, and they became my mentor. And I wouldn't have found out about them if I wasn't asking, who's a bit of a goofball like me, who has this kind of attitude. I'll leave you with this. This is my own personal brand. After everything that I've learned, I've broken it out into these things. Creativity and problem solving and rapid and enthused learning are probably my biggest assets. And then my biggest weakness is that I'm not at all detail oriented. I try to be so upfront with my managers and other people I work with about these strengths and weaknesses. They know that they might need to write me an email 2 or 3 times for me to get a reply, but they also know that if we sit down, have a brainstorm, we're going to come out of that with a bunch of really good ideas. They know that I can take a project 80% of the way there, but might stall a little bit near the end. So sometimes they need to check in on me. But I try to also make sure that I'm in roles where that's the main value that I'm adding, is during that first conception phase. So that's what it's like to build your brand, or at least that's how I built my brand as I've learned things through my career. Now I'm going to hand it over to Sally, who's done marketing for a lot longer and has much more concrete advice on how to build one's personal brand. So I'll pass the mic over to Sally here and let you hop on. If I can find the right way to do that. Excellent. Very smoothly done there. But Sally, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, everyone can hear me? I'm hoping.
Yes,
can I get someone just to say you see my screen and you can hear me and I did this all right?
You've nailed it. It looks great.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, Derek. And thanks for that. Wow, it was great. It was great to hear some of your story too. So just to expand a little bit more on how from everything that Derek was saying, and those questions I think are really, really great to be thinking of, and I'll probably cover a little bit of it in a slightly different way right here. But it's, you know, what is a personal brand, which I think he did a great job in getting started there. And then why should it matter to you? Give me just a minute. Personal branding is a lot, as he was showing. You can take some of the same concepts that you would do, that companies do, and celebrities and big products, and then figure out how do you make that into building a brand about yourself. And he was spot on in saying that the main purpose of your personal brand is to create a perspective in a way in which others view you. And I really believe that there's three foundations that need to be a part of your personal brand. And that is knowing your superpowers. It's really like, what is your deeper why? What is your true purpose in life? And not only that, but also this and statement. So it's knowing that and how it helps others, how it adds value to others. And then creating a personal brand that's memorable and to be trustworthy. And why is this important? Because when you're looking for a job, whether you're looking for a job or you're growing your network or trying to develop your career, you want to be memorable. And to do that, you have to be memorable to create those meaningful connections. And you need to stand out and be chosen. And I'll show you some stats here that can give you an idea of why a personal brand is so important. So this is in the US. It might be a little bit different in Canada, because as you can see over here, just the difference in active job seekers between Canada and the US. And this is recent data over here on this side. But in the US, there's about 250 resumes for every corporate job opening. And everyone who submits a resume, only 4 to 6 will be invited to be interviewed, and only one person will get that position. So you can see it's really competitive. I mean, you probably know this, and this isn't to freak you out, but it's more about speaking to the importance of positioning yourself so you stand out in that sea of all of these people over here, and you're here and here, right? And that's done by creating your personal brand. So as I said before, your best personal brand is going to be built based on the value that you add to others. So just as it's not your logo or an icon, it's also not your resume. And it's about all the many tiny things that you do that leads others to have a positive perception of you, and hopefully not a negative, Ren. You know, there are people who are doing things, and it's out there online right now, and it's not really a good perception. So, and it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. That's why it's not like just your resume. It takes time. It's tiny little steps at a time. Just like the big brands, you know, Coca-Cola, Nike, big celebrities. It took them time. They may say they were overnight celebrities, but they're not. So your whole focus should be on how your superpowers, your greatness, your unique talents, the stuff that you're skilled out and comes naturally to you, how does that serve others? How does it add value to the company that you want to work with? And it's not just about like how talented you are or what your superpowers are, which I'm sure every single one of you has at least one, if not many, superpowers, but it's how you bundle them up to show how it helps them. How do your unique talents help them save money? How does it help them make money? How does it help them mitigate risk? Because those are really the three things behind every job, are those three things. So to do that, you first have to know what are your superpowers. What is your deeper why? What is your purpose? So, and that's it's really the bedrock to your brand. It's what drives you to achieve, and it's what makes you tick. And it's not exactly what you do, that's part of it, but it's really how you do it and why. So if you think about these superheroes, here we have, Superman. He was all about maintaining world peace, and Wonder Woman was all about championing female empowerment. If you can get really clear on what that purpose is and narrow it down a little bit, like Derek was explaining how he did in terms of his strengths and weaknesses, if you know that and you have that clear purpose, it'll give you a reason to wake up in the morning and to go to work and to strive harder and to keep you motivated in your job search and once you get hired, when the days can be a little bit tough sometimes. So without knowing this, your brand will be weak. So a big thing is to think about what is your purpose and what impact would you like to make with and for whom and where in the world. If you get those three things right there, if you can articulate that, that's like your little elevator pitch right there. And these superpowers are the things that come so easily to you. It's like part of your DNA. And it's the magic that helps you to get there. And a lot of people don't know this yet because it's really hard for us to see it in ourselves. And so there's some questions just like the ones that Derek put up. I would absolutely add those to what I put up here. And you can see, like, what are you asked to do all the time? Are people asking you to plan the birthday parties? Are they the ones that's always asking you to fix their computers or their phones? What do you get complimented on or thanked for? Where are people always saying, thank you, thank you? And what comes easily to you? So for instance, my sister, she's an IT whiz, kind of like Derek's story of not necessarily being very detail oriented. I can do a lot with technology, having come from marketing and built, I don't know, maybe 3,000 websites at this point, but I still struggle when new technology comes out. And my sister, it's so easy for her. So think about those things, and this can help you to sort of hone in on what is your superpower. And I'll give you another example along these lines. So I had a client who came to me, and he was, it's during COVID, he was graduating in hospitality, but he was really into event marketing, and particularly with sports and or music. And I was asking him those questions that were on the previous screen, plus a few more. And it really kind of, what's his deeper why? Why did he really want to do that? And a lot of people don't, it's really good to get that clarity. So while I was asking, it became crystal clear that one of his superpowers is really for getting people pumped up for adventures. Okay, this picture is someone on an adventure, right? So it's for an experience. Like, he is so good and naturally can create experiences that people will remember forever. And he's got this enthusiasm, it becomes contagious, right? So he planned this whole event for his friends to go up into the mountains. There happened to be cliffs that you could jump off into the water below. And as he's talking, he's sharing about how one of his female friends who was there was terrified of heights. But because he was having so much fun jumping off the cliffs himself and getting others to, in the end, she did. And here's that picture. So we incorporated that into his brand story. Like, not all of us have that, right? And maybe your superpower isn't to get people to jump off the cliffs. Maybe it's taking huge amounts of data and being able to distill those insights that help that company make that next improvement, that next change. Or maybe you're a fixer, or maybe, to counter Derek, you're that detail person. You're that, you geek out on that. So if you still can't figure it out with these questions and what Derek is saying, then what I encourage you to do is ask someone who knows you well, or go as Derek did and ask those people he suggested. And they often can see more about who you are and those really unique gifts that you have than we can in ourselves. So the second part, and I only have 3 parts, remember? So it's being memorable. And here, you have to be interesting. You can't use like vague, jargony, information on your LinkedIn profile or on your resume. You can't just copy and paste off a job description. So I want to invite you right now to do this very quick exercise and just sort of sit back, take a breath, which I probably need to do because I'm talking fast, and just close your eyes. And I want you to imagine that you're on, you don't have to close your eyes, but just imagine that you're on a first date with someone. And which is kind of a little bit like being on that first date when you're having that first call with the recruiter or the hiring manager, or you're trying to do an informational interview. So just imagine you're on your first date. You're sitting across the table, and here your date is going on and on and on about themselves, how accomplished they are, how many degrees they have, how awesome they are, everything they've done, what car they drive, and you can barely get a word in. And then when you try, they just interrupt you and go back to talking about themselves. And you probably have a family member or a friend who's kind of like this. So here, that's where you're sitting, but at the table next to you is another couple on their first date. And you notice how the guy is listening super attentively to his date. He's asking questions and listening to her responses. He's clearly like genuinely curious about her. And at some point he makes her laugh. So which table do you want to be at? Which date would you remember? Because this story ties into you, again, that mindset behind your personal brand. There's some specific things you can do. You can find those all over the internet. What I want you to get and take away today is that mindset. And part of being memorable is being about them. How do you add value to them? And that it's not that you don't speak to your own strengths and your degrees and your talents and all of those things, but you figure out how to say that so that it shows how what you have and what you do and your superpowers help the other people. So honestly, your careers, your personal brand, everything in your life is really going to depend on your ability to enter these relationships and show how you care for and about others. And if you have that somewhere deep within you as part of your mission and your purpose, you're automatically going to be memorable. You don't have to be the life of the party. You don't have to get people to jump off cliffs. Like, you do you. Every single person, every single one here, you do you, and you'll be fine. So the third part is to be trustworthy. So if you think about it, with successful brands or anywhere you go during your daily life, who you buy, what products, all that, you go to the same restaurant because they deliver the same great food every single time. You choose that product whose quality is always good. And hopefully you go to the hairdresser who never gives you a bad haircut. And your brand needs to do the same thing. So a huge part of job search, honestly, talking to recruiters, winning them over, everything is about showing you can be trusted. So everyone that you speak to along your, well, no, let me back that up. So pretty much recruiters and hiring managers, the question that they have running in their mind is, can I trust you to get the job done well? And will you stay at this job? And so it's really about making them look good, right? At least in those initial stages. Then as you interview, you go up and you might move beyond the recruiter. But the person who's always there, rolling up their sleeves, following through, who can be counted on to deliver that quality work and who maintains relationships over time, that person who can be trusted to show up consistently. So I have, I think, a couple minutes here. I'm checking. Well, I'm going to go really quickly through this because a huge part of developing your brand is being willing to get out there. It's being willing to step up and show up. So some of you would probably cringe at this, but it's, in order to build your brand, you're going to have to put yourself out there into the world. Some of them call it networking. I don't like to call it that. I call it like going out into your world, going on social sites, going on LinkedIn, doing whatever, in your universities and the Alumni Association and meeting people that are doing like really cool things in the world. So if you think about it like making best friends, instead of you think this person, I'm trying to get a job from them. So a lot of my clients are really afraid to do this kind of stuff. They're very shy about doing it. So I encourage you to be brave. And part of an easy way to do that, I was going to talk a little bit more like, don't play small. Don't play small. If you're playing small, find a way to be brave and be bigger and take tiny little steps. You don't have to ask like the CEO out to coffee or something like that, but come up with a plan and put in some tiny little steps, whether it's building your brand, and part of that is being willing to network. It's being willing to go out there and meet people and talk to people. So I can't stress that enough, and I'm going to tell you why. Because, so here's, just make a list, come up with like little things you can do. But here's a true statistic right now. 80% of jobs are never listed online. So what that means is that most job seekers spend 90% of their time looking on job boards, but they're not on job boards. They're not on LinkedIn. They're not even posted on career pages. So the way that most people are finding those jobs that aren't even listed is through networking. And so that's where I come back to being brave. Because if you're going to go the traditional and play small and not put yourself out there, you're not going to find these jobs. That's where the majority of it is. And it will continue. Whatever you put in now, one little tiny step at a time, will continue to serve you throughout your career. So with that, in sum, because I'm running out of time, and we'll do a Q&A, and I have some stuff I can share with you afterwards, but know your superpowers and how they help others. Be memorable and be trustworthy. And now, I think we are going to go into Q&A right now, and you guys can ask Derek and me any of your questions that you might have.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sally. That was a great talk, and I feel like I learned a lot from that as well, so I really appreciate it. Okay, so I think we've got some questions coming in through the chat here. So a question that I saw is, I'm wondering on how to get some tips on how not to oversell yourself when talking to an employer. Where and when should you put the brakes on? And what are the trade-offs when it comes to wanting to represent yourself as well as possible? Sally, you want to take a crack at that one?
I do. I have some ideas. I really think going back to I don't know when that question came in, but going back to, again, if you bring in the mindset, if you overselling or being like that person who's just all about themselves, ego, arrogant, I'm so great at this, whatever, doesn't work. So what you have to do is you have to find a way to create like stories or show them how everything that you're really great at, because you have that. I want you to own that. I want you to bring that, right? But it's going to go on deaf ears, just like in that first date, if you don't show how that is going to help the person that you want to get hired by. How is that going to help that company? So if you can spin anything that you have that is your superpower, stuff that you're really great at, that comes easily to you, and look at the job description, right? Look at what they put there and what are their top things that they're looking for. What problem, what's like the main problem they need to have solved? And how can your stuff help solve that or meet a need, save them money, make them money, reduce risk?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And I would say another potential way is to make sure that you're grounding yourself in those stories, like Sally mentioned. I found that the best responses that I get are rarely ones that are kind of, hyperbole around who you are. I want to hear about what you did. I want to hear about a time when you exhibited those strengths. And by tying it to something that you've actually done, a project that you've completed or something else, I think you'll find it a lot easier to sell yourself because you're talking about things that are real. I think a lot of the time, especially when I was a new grad, I felt really uncomfortable talking myself up. I felt like that was kind of dishonest and things like that. But you want to think before the interview about the stories that you can tell that are related to this position, you know, do a little homework if you must, and how they will paint you in a good light without you needing to exaggerate, because you've probably done amazing work. You're applying to this job because you are qualified. So just bring those stories to bear and take your time, find the right story and share it.
Yeah. You know, just to expound on that just a little bit, because I know, so I'm not sure, but I think some of you might not have, you don't have that experience because you're still in school, or you're newly graduated and you don't have the experience that Derek and I have, right? So it's hard, you know, everyone's saying get quantifiable data, that kind of thing. But because of working with so many new graduates and university students trying to get internships, there are ways for you to, and it's part of building your brand, so it doesn't happen overnight, but there are ways for you to participate in let's say you have a group project in one class. There is a way for you to participate in that, so you're not the person always like at the back hoping everyone else does it. And you can then carry those stories in, or you volunteer for some charity drive event for your school or something like that. So there are always ways where you can find something about yourself, whether it's hard data, like hard skills that you have, or the soft things. Like you can bring in personal stories. Hey, I always am the one who organizes all the summer camping trips that we do. I'm always the one that get people to leap right off that cliff. I'm always the one to get them to try that new product first, right? So it doesn't have to be, you know, I have 15 years of marketing experiences and I've built 3,000 websites. It doesn't have to be that. You can get creative with that. Don't you agree, Derek?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the time, your employer is going to be spending a lot of time with you. So getting to know who you are, what makes you tick, and what he'll be able to, you know, trust you with, that's really valuable. And a lot of the time, it's those personal details that make that sell. Cool. Some other questions that we have here. If I'm switching careers, how do I know how to adapt or change my personal brands? I'm planning to leave journalism for communications, and I'm looking for some tips.
You want to take that? I don't know if you've done that. Have you done that? I've had clients that have done that.
Yeah, so I've done a bit of this, and
yeah.
I think my experience applying for Unity was a big one, because I was looking at Unity for a long time, and I had applied to Unity a few different times for a few different roles back in my time when I wanted to be a software developer. I applied for that, and I wasn't a software developer at the time. I was an applications engineer, and then I applied for another software developer position while I was in product marketing. And now I realize, no, I don't want to do software development. But a couple pieces of advice I'd give. Number one, if you are going to be doing something totally different than what you've done before, if your resume doesn't tell that story right now, then it helps to work with your network. So if you happen to have worked very closely with a particular company and they have a communications department, that can be a great place for you to start, because if they know you, they're more likely to take a risk on you doing something that you've never done before. Now, if you don't have those connections yet, as a lot of new grads don't have those connections yet, then I would say start treating that new field you're entering as your target audience, and start thinking about how to position yourself for that target audience. Learn from people who have that job about what makes someone great in that job, and then find the parallels from your own time in journalism that will make you great at that. That will make you an amazing interviewee. It will still be a little bit challenging to get that first interview because you don't necessarily have that job description. But, you know, be bold on LinkedIn. If they had a recruiter name next to the posting, reach out to that recruiter, ask some questions about the job. The recruiters want to show that they've brought people in. So if you reach out to a recruiter, chances are you're going to skip the whole cover letter process and just get right to the interview. So yeah, it'll be a little bit more legwork when you're changing industries, but luckily journalism communications, they are simpatico, and I have a bunch of journalist friends who've made the switch and vice versa.
Yeah, well, and I've got a story. I had a client, and all he did was he was a financial analyst, and it was his 4 or 5 year, you know, degree that he's invested all this time into. Worked for a big financial company in New York, got 3 promotions. He'd been there for like 18 months. He looked at those people who were a little ahead of him, like we talked about, like that mentor, and he realized it absolutely was not what he wanted to do, and he wanted to do software engineering. He spent the first year of COVID, and he went to school, or not, like he went to like a trade school, right, to learn how to be a software engineer, got some certification, and absolutely would not let any of the naysayers or the doubters or anyone take him off of his focus. And he landed a job. And it wasn't easy, but so some of that is upskilling. And then I have someone, or even myself, right? So I used to be, maybe not quite like Derek, but I used to market products. I used to market wireless earbuds and all sorts of things for people, right? So, and for me, what I wanted to do, it was great, but everyone from my company in the US moved to Australia. I couldn't move to Australia. So I thought, okay, what do I want to do? And I ended up thinking, I want to help people market themselves. So what do I know about marketing products and brands that would help people to position themselves in a competitive job landscape, right? So that's also, think about what you can bring over and carry over as skills, hard and soft skills.
Absolutely. Next question on the list here, we've got, how do you overcome the imposter syndrome? A lot of people will, on this call, have a lot of education, but still feel like they need to prove their expertise. So Sally, any advice there?
Oh, that's such, I mean, we could talk until midnight around this, honestly. But here's a couple things I would say. One, notice the voices in your head when it's going. When it's saying, I'm not good enough to apply to this, who am I to do this? I can't do this. So for instance, if you're, if you're someone like me, I haven't done a TED Talk, I haven't written a book, I haven't done all that, like all those things, and I compare myself to others, like throw that out the window, but notice when you get pulled into that, because that's that imposter syndrome going. And so I created like a superhero. I know my whole thing was about superheroes, but so I created these little caricatures. So I know when the villain, which is the imposter voice talking, that thing, and I created Shine Your Light Lizzie. Lizzie's my niece, and she's awesome, and she lets her shine light, her light shine really well. So I'm like, shine your light, Lizzie. And when I can see that, I can kind of, by personifying it, objectify it a little bit, and keep myself moving forward in the direction I want to go.
Love that. Love that answer. Yeah, okay, next question on here is do we need a catchy tagline when branding ourselves on social media? I will add a quick thought on this. There was a time when I looked at the kind of about me section on LinkedIn and said, that's some bunk. And they have they have like a robot that will generate your about me for you from your bio, which seems really helpful, but doesn't really do a great job differentiating you like everything we talked about. It is very useful if you are currently looking for a new role or trying to establish yourself in a space, if I want to be an advocate in a particular market or something like that, to have a good bio. And I would say, look to your peers. Don't, this is, we're all new grads here. Sometimes it's okay to get inspired by your peers. It's not plagiarism, it's inspiration, because you're not going to write their bio, but you might find a way that they phrase their accomplishments and be really enamored with that. Chances are, if you're looking at having a tagline, you have an audience you're trying to impress, and it's the hiring manager at the company that you want or in an industry that you want. So build your positioning statements, craft that, what you do differently, why you're great for that role, and what you're looking for. And if you can put that in your about me, then you will have more traction with recruiters. And when I made a good about me, it really did turn around the amount of replies I got from recruiters on LinkedIn.
Yeah. And I just have to acknowledge that I wouldn't say a catchy tagline, but I would say a narrative that shows how you uniquely can serve and add value to someone. Just like you did, Derek. I'm sure you didn't come up with a catchy tagline, and you probably didn't with Unity either when moving into the industrial space, because it's not appropriate there. It might be for some people. I mean, some people, they've got like, you'll go online and their whole website is about champagne, and they do copywriting. And so they branded themselves as like the champagne copywriter. I don't know about that, but it makes them memorable. So, depending on what you're doing. But I would say more it's about crafting that narrative so that and I love the idea of steal like an artist. There's a book out there called Steal Like an Artist, and it's amazing. Highly recommend it. But like because I do this 24/7, you know, I go on LinkedIn and I try and find like good profiles, and a lot of them are really bad. They're just generic, like they don't help you to stand out at all. And so I just want to acknowledge that, one, it's really hard to talk about ourselves and not feel like we're being boastful or being proud or things like that. And it's hard to some of us, it's really easy, almost to the detriment, and others it's really hard to do. And the other is just really whatever you can do, try and get your own voice and be you, and not just copy, especially if it's a bad example, you know, of someone else that you see out there. But so be unique. That's what I would say. Strive to find a way to talk about yourself uniquely.
Absolutely. Okay, next question. This one maybe we can answer yeah, okay. So should we describe our brand differently in our social networks versus our professional networks, or should the brand be consistent? I would say in my experience, people know your professional brand is on LinkedIn. They'll keep it there. Twitter, I would say, crosses that line a little bit, especially if you have a public Twitter. I would say, depending on what you're posting on social media, it's probably fine. Most recruiters aren't going to really judge your pictures from your Facebook party last weekend. But if you are, you know, very vocal on an app like Twitter, which might be the second search result under your name, maybe set your thing to private while you're searching for jobs. I wouldn't advocate for having the exact same persona, because I think that can kind of limit the fun you can have. But I think there should be some elements of consistency. I think your personal brand shouldn't be so dissimilar in your private sphere versus your public sphere, because it might mean that your personal brand hasn't quite made it yet, and you might be forcing yourself to be something you're not when you're in the office.
Yeah, I would agree. And you know, I think about it because, like, if you're a graphic designer, it's great to have an Instagram account. And in that instance, you are being a little bit more intentional and thoughtful about it and what you're doing, because you're trying to show yourself off as a graphic designer. And you may be on LinkedIn as well, which is, you know, a little bit more dry, not quite as creative of a platform. But sometimes it is a blend of having one or the other, or you just choose the one where you know your audience is. Just like we do in marketing, you find who do you want to work for? Where are they living? You know, that kind of thing. And you go on that platform and focus on that, so you don't get too overwhelmed with trying to do too many things.
Absolutely. Sally, there's a question here for you specifically. You said that we have to be trustworthy with our brands. How do we effectively communicate that when we're applying for jobs? Are there certain words or phrases that we should be using in order to increase that trust?
Well, you know, this is an interesting one, especially if you are a new grad, because one, like, top of mind that comes immediately to me is don't be a job hopper. And that means, and there's actually huge statistics around this. So if you stay at a job for even a year and a day, your chances of getting that next job are so much larger than if every job you've had has been, you know, 3 months, 9 months, you haven't even been able to stay at one job for a year. Or sometimes there's reasons why we've had absences. There was COVID or a family member or whatever. But the only caveat I would say with that is that entry-level job seekers and entry-level professionals, they might have had only 3-month stints at what they were doing, right? It might have been internships or volunteer work or this or that. So not to worry too much about that if that was your experience. But when it comes down to, am I trustworthy, just think about, especially if you're in the beginning of the interview process, that recruiter, that hiring manager, and even if it's the president, it's a small company, so it's the CEO or the president talking to you. What they want to know is, can I trust her to show up? Will she get the job, or the job done well? And will she stay? Because it costs a lot of money when people turn over. So if you focus on anything that you can show those 3 things, it'll come across.
Absolutely. Yeah. Another great question here. So for women who work in a majority male environment, how do you avoid the branding of having female associated soft skills like organization and communication, and having that potentially limit their career instead of moving them forward or helping them advance? How do you fight against those stereotypes being part of your first impressions?
Wow. Well, I'll tell you one thing for me. Like when I was working with New Hera, the earbud company, the two co-founders were male, but we had some strong, so I was one of the first 6 employees. So part of the C-suite, the executive, and we had some, I'd say it was probably half female and half male. And if you can do that, if you can find a culture that actually empowers women and allows them to stand with those soft skills that the guys might not bring, and it's a match, but also in their own power about the talents and the uniqueness that they do give. So for instance, I think about our CFO, and she was a powerhouse, but she also was a mom, and she was caring, and all of that. I really think it goes back more to doing some research into the culture. Because I just had a client come to me today and said she's on her 3rd interview, and I looked at the website. You guys, this is just gonna floor me. Okay, I gotta say this. I'm gonna rant for a minute. I'm gonna vent for a minute. So I went on the website and I looked at the company page, and all the guys' pictures were like Derek right now. Looking straight, shoulders like this, nice smile. That's right, it was like that. You know what the women's pictures were? I'm not kidding. They're all tilted, their heads. Every single one of the women had a picture like that. And I get it. That was probably the professional photographer that they did. But that's, if I'm going to be up with you, Derek, my picture's going to be like this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be like, hey, honey, So there are some things with your own branding to be aware of, that you show up and you bring that, and don't work for a company that isn't going to respect that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it can be really hard. Coming from engineering, there is such a massive imbalance in terms of genders in the field, and there are a lot of company cultures that are really not great about that, and there are some that are really good. It shouldn't be on you as the applicant to have to suss that out, but I think it's well worth asking a lot of those questions early on. And I think at the end of the day, it's being really rock solid and knowing your value and communicating that will help you kind of establish your own. And there will still be people who cast their stereotypes, and you can either you can disprove them with actions, or just try not to work for those people, because it sounds like they suck. Yeah. So next question on here. What is your best advice on how I can make sure that my brand story stands out for my peers? How do I stay competitive? And I think this is especially relevant for new grads who often look very, very similar on paper to a lot of the other new grads. If you're walking through a job fair, like, it feels like a lot of the time my value is my GPA, because everything else is too similar. So Sally, what advice can you give to people who are looking to differentiate themselves in a crowded room?
Well, it's interesting because there's another question in here, Derek, that says, what is the one must do when applying for a job in respect to your brand and story? And the one thing that I've found that has really helped job seekers to stand out, and this is of all experience levels, professional levels, and that is to really, what I advise is on your resume, you have like a little summary statement at the top. You don't even have to say summary, but you have a little blurb at the top, maybe 3 to 5 sentences. And then and that is showing your warmth, your uniqueness, your personality, how you stand out above those, above or differently, differentiate yourself. And then, as Derek said, that about section on LinkedIn is crucial, because not only are you you have more space to talk about who you are as a person, and it's where you get your humanness in, because a resume is kind of a dry document except for that little spot. And so your LinkedIn profile is where you get that personality in. You get to have a little bit, still keeping it professional, and so that, and it's where I often spend the most time with my clients, Because if you get those two branding aspects right, that little summary at the top of your resume and that about section, plus all that, like LinkedIn and everything, is completely searchable. I mean, those recruiters are on the back end and they've got a software system they're using. So you get that about section right, and you're going to be attracting them to you instead of you having to work so hard. You're going to attract that hidden job market.
Absolutely. Love that. Cool. Next question. So we got a couple questions around, not necessarily personal branding, on general kind of product and branding and things like that. If anyone wants to talk about, product marketing, feel free to reach out. That's my actual expertise. I work with brand marketing teams quite often in terms of like building general awareness. But yeah, you want to talk value propositions for individual products? Fire me a message on LinkedIn. Add me as a contact. Happy to chat. Well, I'll say this in short. It's the same as brand positioning, but you're talking more specifically about an audience and more specifically about the challenges your product helps someone overcome. In fact, it's usually easier with a product because it was made to do a particular thing versus all the nuance and complexity of a person or a whole company. Those are harder to message. Let's see.
I would also say, Derek, I'm just going to add in here because I see it done all the time, especially from new graduates who come out in certain fields. So for instance, you come out in media or design or communications, or, something it's not chemical engineering. Okay. And so they don't know how to narrow in on exactly the types of positions they want to do or the types of companies that they want to work for. And so they create this sort of like really big, bland, generic, all over the place. Because if you come out with the media studies, there's so much you can do. But do you want to do videography? Do you want to do marketing? Do you want to do in what space do you want to work with? Do you want to work for a women-led organization or things like that? So the more, I really encourage you, the more specific you can get about the types of companies you want to work with and the type of work you want to do. If you hate sitting in a desk, I don't know if marketing is the thing for you. Well, let me not say that. I don't know if like copywriting might be the thing for you. Marketing could be, because you could do experiential marketing, you could do event marketing, you could do all those things. But figure out what your values are, what your personality is like, and try and narrow what your destination is, what that dream job really is.
Love it. And I think we have time for one more question here. And Sally, I'll turn this one to you. Are there any resources you can recommend where people can see how others have built their branding stories and where they can learn how they can frame their own branding stories?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. If you are actively searching for a job, and I think that this is the same in Canada as it is in the US, but it's a key tip for you guys. If you're actively searching, or you're going to want to switch careers, or you're looking to get promoted within the career space, whatever that is, I highly recommend that you get the LinkedIn career, what do you call that, package, subscription. So you're going to pay like $29 a month. There's a trick around that. You sign up, you get 30 days free, then you quit right on that 30 days, and then they'll offer you something for cheaper. So don't tell LinkedIn I'm telling you that. I hope no one here is from LinkedIn, but that's how you do that. And the reason that I say that is because when you go to LinkedIn to that next level, you get what's called LinkedIn Learning, and they have all these videos, and almost everything that I've seen on there is current, and they're giving out really good information. Because there's a lot of stuff, if you just do a blind search on the website, that might be outdated. Like so many times I see people saying to do your resume like with a photo of yourself or something like that. You absolutely don't want to do that in 2021 or ever, like for a while till things change, but not now. So you got to be a little bit careful, but I would say LinkedIn and LinkedIn Learning is a really good place. The other thing I would say is I share tons of free resources. I post on LinkedIn on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, every day, 9:30 Pacific time. So go, as Derek said, connect with me, see what I'm putting out there. DM me if you want something specific. I can point you to the right resource that's really going to give you good information quickly, so you don't have to do hours and go down the rabbit hole. And then I have some stuff on my website. So, but I'm happy if anyone wants a specific resource or you're grappling with something specific, just email me. I think they're going to share. They're going to send an email. They're going to share our information. So you'll be able to link up with us and contact us and all that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sally. All right. Well, I know we're a little over the hour here. Shall we bring back on the rest of the McGill team?
Yes. I think it's calling. I think Nora is going to come back. There.
Yes.
Nora, we missed you.
It's been years.
Well, it was extremely interesting. Thank you so much to our speakers, Derek, Sally, for your excellent talks, and to all of you for your great questions. I would now like to introduce my dear friend and fellow board member from the McGill Women's Alumni Association, Lauren Ahmed, to deliver the closing remarks.
So hello, everybody. Thank you, Nora, for the introduction. Thank you very much, Derek and Sally, for the very valuable insights and for being here tonight. Such an enriching presentation and much added value to our audience and to myself personally. I did benefit from that a lot. We have so many takeaways to share with this, and the recording is going to be available soon for anybody who would like to re-listen to that. Don't forget to be trustworthy, to be memorable, to seek a mentor, to seek help from others to help you position yourself and have a specific brand and stand out in the space there. Feel free to reach out with our speakers on LinkedIn, and feel free also to follow up our social media, both the McGill Women Alumni and the McGill Young Alumni Associations. We're both available on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and on Instagram and other platforms as well. Thank you again for being here tonight. We're looking forward to collaborating again in various events, and have a great night all.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.